Greetings and hello again. This video is running under the assumption you've seen the other two previously, so if you haven't seen the other two that I just posted, I highly advise going to check those out before proceeding forward. Now, assuming you've recognized the state of the church today and realized this means that for all intents and purposes Catholicism is dead, now, and then you should have started looking into what Catholicism was before it was dead, maybe now you have an understanding of what should be happening in the Catholic Church versus what is happening in the Catholic Church. So, what's next? Clearly, you know how things should be, but I know how things should be, but what do we do about that? Well, the simple fact of the matter is that most of the Catholic world today needs to be converted to Catholicism. They do not follow Catholicism in any meaningful way. They don't know what they're supposed to be doing, they don't know what they're supposed to believe, and they don't know how at all they're supposed to even operate in a society as Christians. So, what's to be done about this? Well, we need to convert the world. We need strong, good, valid clergy who can be said through apostolic succession to be able to perform the sacraments, and then they need to perform them correctly. We need educated men of the cloth whose primary philosophical influence are the doctors of the church, illicit Catholic teaching, and nothing else. We do not need these guys coming into the pulpits like we have in some of these trad circles, whose blueprint for a Catholic society is Mein Kampf. And don't look at me like that. You know these people exist. You've been in the trad circle long enough. You've met some crazy priests who basically think the Holocaust didn't happen. And if it did happen, it would have been a great thing. So you've met these people. We need people whose primary influence for their Catholic belief is just that, Catholicism. We don't need other secular ideologies coming into the work on this. Catholic philosophers are something else completely different, versus, people who are not Catholic and, for whatever reason have an opinion on how the Catholic Church should be. Those people should be disregarded completely, because they don't even follow the religion. So what does their opinion on the religion matter? The same viewpoint with Pope Francis. He clearly doesn't believe Catholicism. He doesn't teach Catholicism. He doesn't even like the papal office. So why should his opinion on what Catholicism should be matter a lick? Right? Right. Good. So we need clergy and we need laity who understand the faith and can convert people to Catholicism. Now, you could say the laity alone could do this. And, well, yes, I'm willing to bet most conversions today are affected by the laity. But then where do they go? It occurs to me as a traditionalist, and I'm sure it's occurred to a lot of people, that even when people become interested in your religious opinions, and they seem to agree with them mostly, you're very hesitant to take that next step to convert them. Why? Because what are you converting them to? You don't have a community, and you know they don't have the intellectual forbearance to put up with the garbage you do on a daily basis, or at least you don't think they do. And even if they do, you don't want to put them through that. So, because it's hard enough keeping yourself Catholic half the time, given the state of the world today. Let's just be honest with ourselves here about the nature of most of our spiritual lives, okay? All of us here are teetering between apostasy, joining Eastern Orthodoxy, or just offing ourselves, okay? I have never seen a more suicidal bunch than traditionalists, okay? I'm not giving away names here, and I'm not bashing any of you. Most of you I love who I know have these suicidal tendencies, I love very much. Or at least I don't want you to die, because that would endanger your mortal soul. So, I love you all very much, because, obviously, I want you to be saved and all this other stuff. I don't want you to, off yourself, and of course, your family, and all these other things. So, really, you don't want to put someone else where you are, because you feel like you alone should be dealing with this for some reason, not anyone else. And we need clergy, because clergy can administer sacraments. A good priest is the cornerstone of a good Catholic community. It's what it's built on. If you don't have anywhere you find a good Catholic community, I promise you, you will find good priests, you will find good bishops, you'll find good cardinals, and so forth and so on. Or monks, if you don't have these ingredients, if you don't have these things, these good, sculptors of a Catholic community, you won't find a good Catholic community, and you won't create one. We need priests. I once was with some, I once heard a friend of mine talking about his time he spent amongst TFP, Tradition, Family, and Property, and, those people that have kind of fallen off the face of the earth since the war for marriage and, the war for abortion ended up just going completely south like we all knew it would, but that's another story for another time, and I've spoken on why it did before, and you can check out my writings and my videos and see what I think of it. But, this guy told me that he was having dinner with some TFP, and, it was one of their functions, and he was talking to them about the movement and stuff, and just learning about them, and at one point, one of them just kind of chuckled and said, when asked how they get the Mass, one of them just kind of chuckled, and, they all kind of looked at each other, and, one of them said, well, it's difficult, it's really hard to find priests who will even give us Mass sometimes, because they don't like the TFP. And someone else said, half the time, I wish we could just lock a traditional Catholic priest with valid orders in the basement and just bring him out when we need him. And everyone kind of laughed at that. But the sad thing is, it's true. I think a lot of traditionalist Catholics feel that way. They just wish there was some unintrusive priest somewhere they could go to for sacraments and the Mass and not have to worry about the stress of him being Orthodox, because they would know he was. But that's a real problem that a lot of Catholics have. This is why I agree so much with Marshal Lefebvre on some of the things he says about the state of the clergy. When he says Catholics should not have to be canonists, canon lawyers, and theological professors just to keep the faith. That is the job of their priests. They should be able to trust their priests to be good instructors and good teachers. And the only people who should have to worry about the orthodoxy of these people are the bishops, are Rome, inquisitors, or the CDF. These are the only people who should have to worry about their orthodoxy. This should be something they can be trusted to take care of. Ultimately, in a hierarchical traditional society, the hierarchy carry as much blame for the problems of the society as the people do. I've contemplated writing completely on this subject altogether. To a point, you have to blame the old blood. You have to blame the old aristocracy and the monarchs for the state of their countries. They failed to grasp the importance of what was going on around them, and they failed to act. Blessed Karl of Austria-Hungary, I love the guy to death, but the reason he lost the crown is totally his fault. Large sections of the Hungarians were willing to fight and win a royalist civil war to regain Austria-Hungary. Which is really weird, because the Hungarians didn't like the Austro-Hungarian Empire at the time, because they felt like they got the short end of the stick. But they were willing to help Blessed Karl, but what does he do? He refuses to fight, because he finds violence repugnant. Prince Philip II, I think his reaction to the failure of the Spanish Armada is, as a faithful Catholic, exemplary. But as a monarch, it's inexcusable. It's completely and utterly inexcusable. He should have kept trying. If the theater in England failed in the UK and it was a disaster and it was never going to bear fruit, the least he should have done is maintain the war for Catholicism on the continent. I think that the Habsburgs, who signed the treaty, which basically said that the Spanish and Austrian Habsburgs could not cooperate and could not jointly rule, I believe that was an absolute farce. It should never have been signed. The Treaty of Westphalia should never have been signed. It should never have been held up. Ferdinand II, I believe it's Ferdinand II or the Third, should be directly blamed for thinking that Wallenstein was going to betray him. All Wallenstein did was entertain diplomats from the Protestant side. He didn't accept anything. He didn't even tell them he was going to accept their offer. He just thanked them for their time and sent them on their way. There was no evidence that Wallenstein was going to betray the Catholics. There was no evidence of that, but he jumped on it anyway. The Leo XIII should have reformed Action Française. He should have told them to get rid of these secular conservative elements, and, he should not have just thrown cold water on the monarchist cause in France by giving, what amounted to a pat on the back to the French Republic. He should not have done that. That was a mistake. That was a clear-cut political mistake. Okay? The Stuarts should not have stopped pressing their claim to the British Isles for anything. Maybe the Pope, giving the rights to the Hanoverians was the right thing to do, but it still shouldn't have been done, because there were legitimate claimants to the throne who were still willing to fight. Louis XIV should not have left the Jacobites high and dry when he realized politically it was a lost cause. He should have kept fighting. The British could have most certainly been pressured later into putting a Stuart back on the throne, or at least giving the Scots and the Catholics of the United Kingdom more rights than what they presently had. It could have feasibly been done. My own ancestors, the O'Neills, should not have left Ireland. They should have stayed there. Their duty was to the people they were chosen, theoretically speaking, philosophically speaking, by God to govern and to protect. They should not have left. And if they left, they should have had every intention of going back and going back and reclaiming their island. They should never have left. I'll put that on me. It's my ancestors' fault that Ireland today is probably in the place it is. It's completely their fault, because who filled the void after they left? You know, these Confederates and Republicans and proto-communists. And then later with the IRA, actual communists who may or may not have had actual ties to the Soviet Union. So, and even then, paradoxically, the popes were saying the IRA was okay, you know, even though they had ties to the Soviet Union, which they were currently fighting. You know, they're the modern church, so it doesn't really matter what they think, does it? There's a lot of things that should have been done, you know, that should or should not have been done by our ancestors. As much as we have to look at their successes, we have to look at their mistakes so we don't make them again. We can't just deify them to the point that we can't be honest and say this is where they messed up. Charles V, I love the guy. Maybe he shouldn't have abdicated the throne, though. Maybe he should have stayed. You know, maybe it was a bad idea. It's just, these are the questions. These are the things we have to ponder. These are the things we have to be honest about. Because as much as we learn what doesn't work from our ancestors, we need to learn what does work. And learning these things and converting people and having priests who can create communities for these people is crucially important. Catholicism is never meant to be something that is kept on its own. It's meant to be a community thing. It's meant to have priests and churches and temples and things. That's what it's supposed to be like. It was never supposed to be something that people just lived on their own. It was never supposed to be that. And that's where a lot of traditionalists are right now. And it's not just converts who are going to need this. There's a lot of traditionalists who have just flagged and given up because they don't have any support. They're fighting for something and they have no support. They have no one to go to when things are rough. They have no one to give them mass. They have no one to hear their confessions. Many of them have just given up. That's why I think a lot of them have gone to the far right, because it fills a spiritual void that has currently been left in them. We need clergy. We need priests. We need some way of getting a good, reliable clergy that can affect change and that can administer to the laity. Because look, the laity can do whatever action they want, okay? They can do as much civil action as they want, but that's not the point of Catholicism. The point of Catholicism is to save souls. Christendom only existed and was allowed to exist because on the mere principle of the thing, people tend to respond to spiritual things better when their temporal needs are better kept to. This is the reason for the knights and the formation of the Carolingian Empire, okay? Nobody would have kept following Christianity or the Pope in Rome for long if the barbarians just kept burning down every monastery in sight, and if the Vikings could menace anything within 15 miles of a coast. They wouldn't see any protection in these new gods. They would retreat to the old. That point kept in mind, there are still some other things that need to be considered and done when it comes to interacting with the modern church that I'll cover in another video.